Foundation named this lecture series in honor of Ann Roberts. Ann's lifetime of dedication to the historic preservation of Nashville has made significant impacts on our city and will continue to do so for generations. There's no way I can go through everything that Ann has contributed in this couple minutes, but just briefly, Ann joined the Metro Historical Commission as a staff member in 1976. She became executive director in 1982 and served in that capacity through 2008. While she was executive director, she served as chair of the Union Station Oversight Committee. She implemented both landmark zoning and conservation zoning in historic neighborhoods. She successfully fought against the construction of a 21-story building on 2nd Avenue. She worked with other Metro departments to repurpose their historic buildings. And under her leadership, Nashville City Cemetery received funding for its renovation and preservation. She was on the original planning committee for the African American History and Culture Conference, which continues today as an annual event, co-sponsored by MHC and the Tennessee State University. She was instrumental in saving the Ryman, Fort Negley, Sunnyside, the Shelby Street Bridge, now known as the John Siegenthaler Pedestrian Bridge. Following the '98 tornado that devastated East Nashville, Ann Roberts helped with recovery with the Regional Urban Design Assistance Team and Rediscover East. She received Historic Nashville's Outstanding Individual Achievement Award in 1991. In 2012, Ann co-founded with Ann Eden and Tim Walker the Metro Historical Commission Foundation, which is now the Nashville Historical Foundation. That's a friends group to the Historical Commission. She served as our president from 2020 through 2024. She's also served with Historic Nashville, Inc. and the district, among many others. In her decades of preservation, Ann has always had an interest in Nashville's historic architecture, from our late 18th century examples through to mid-century modern. So she was very thrilled to find that we were going to be addressing mid-century modern. And if you're listening, thank you for all you've done. If you would like to make a donation to Nashville Historical Foundation, there is a QR code on the front desk. We would love for you to make a donation if you like. So as you know, this is a series of 3 lectures. Our first lecture tonight is by David Paine. David grew up in Atlanta in a mid-century modern house designed by his father in 1958. He came to Nashville in 1976 straight out of graduate school with an MA in architectural history to work for the Metro Historical Commission. In 1984, he opened a graphic design studio, which grew into an advertising PR firm, and he is now a residential realtor with Onward Real Estate and loves to work with mid-century properties. David?
All right, glad to see you all. Let's see if the technical difficulties are. All right, this is not a PowerPoint, it's actually a PDF. We went through like 8 generations while you all were traveling here, and we got it. So a series of 3 lectures. I'm gonna try to talk about what we mean when we say modern and mid-century modern, how it got here, and what it is, so that then Kim can talk about practitioners and Sandra Shelton can show the pictures. So I'm not going to show much about Nashville. We're going to go back to the turn of the last century and talk about kind of how things progressed from there. Defining modern is a kind of a difficult. I'm going to knock this thing over.
There we go.
Knock it over directly, as my grandmother would say. How do you define modern? Because modern as a fixed concept sort of goes against the dictionary definition of what modern is supposed to be. So you pull stuff out of the dictionary, easy to do now, you can do it online. You're relating to the present or recent times, up to date tools, ideas, techniques, denoting a current recent style or trend that's getting closer. A significant departure from traditional styles at least at the time it was created, and I think that's what we need to focus in on, is this departure that then, well, I'm going to say ossified, that is not, none of this is ossified, but coalesced into something that simply became an aesthetic style as opposed to a departure from anything in the past. In terms of a little bit of background, architectural developments, like all stylistic developments, are uneven. Things happen at different paces in different places. Europeans and the U.S. along this track were on different arcs. The Europeans got a little more modern a little sooner than we did. Nazism and World War II changed the course of events dramatically in this area, along with every other area, but in this area too. And post-war America caught up with Europe, architecturally speaking, for a time, and I'm not sure where the leadership maybe bounces back and forth now, but that is for a different lecture. Stylistic timeline, a little bit about where we were and then how we came. Okay, am I gonna have to, I'm gonna have to scroll a little bit to give you everything. Maybe Tim, when he gets back. 1900 to 1940, that's the turn of the last century up to the general outbreak of World War II. America was in the full embrace of stylistic revivals, wholehearted. We loved stuff from the past and we reinterpreted and went forward with stylistic tropes from the past. Modernism is beginning to develop in Europe. I'm not saying it's sweeping through Europe, but there are definite outcroppings among progressive cultures in Europe. There are some American pioneers and outliers who stepped forward, but they didn't have legs. They didn't have a whole lot of coattails and followers. The Great Depression complicates things all across the globe because nobody had any money to build anything much, and so there isn't a whole lot to look at until between, say, 1930 and 1950, there just isn't a whole lot because the Depression and then the war that engulfed the world stopped a lot of building that would have been going on otherwise. The rise of the Nazis and the beginnings of the war shift the focus from Europe to the U.S. in terms of developing what we call modernism. 1945 to 1980, the international style, because modernism came across the water, it was international, rises in America, and the international style and variants just pretty much ruled until the postmodern reaction. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, and every time the pendulum swings, you are pretty much guaranteed it will swing back. I don't know whether I'm going to live long enough to see our current pendulum swing back. But I don't know whether I even want to. We'll decide. So, what was going on? We're going to have to, okay. You're going to see me scroll a bit. What was going on in the first decades of the previous century was America was deep in the embrace of revival, stylistic revivalism. These are two famous buildings you may know, Grand Central Station on the left and Marble House, one of the Vanderbilt mansions in Newport, both neo-Baroque, heavy-duty, three-dimensional, neoclassical revival, but intense and deep and three-dimensional and heavy. We have a little bit of Roman revival here. If any of you, I'm too young to really have ever been at Penn Station in New York. I don't know whether anybody ever was, but the photographs are astounding, based in part on a revival of the Roman bath. You see the arches and the gables there, the terminate windows from recreating the ruins of Roman baths and the giant courtyard around. We also got into Gothicizing. This is the Woolworth building from 1903. Cass Gilbert is the architect. This was the tallest building in the world when it was built, and it's all tricked out in terracotta that pulls from Gothic medieval precedents. And the inside is a little bit Byzantine, Romanesque. If you're ever in Lower Manhattan, go through the revolving doors and just look at this building. It is just a complete freak out. It's wonderful. And in our suburbs, we have the always attractive English Tudor revival, sometimes called Stockbroker Tudor, on the left there, and a colonial federal revival house on the right. Ubiquitous everywhere. We've all seen them, going from the teens right up until the Depression sort of stopped almost everything in the early 1930s. Of course, these currents are reflected in Nashville's architecture. Union Station, what could be more modern than a train station in 1900? So we went back to the Romanesque medieval era to express solidity, imposing, important. We are an important city. We have an important train station, done all over the country. And what could be grander than going back to Marie Antoinette and Baroque stuff at the Hermitage Hotel? And Tom, you asked about cocktails. We might just caravan over to the bar, and I'm not ordering for everybody. It's everyone for himself. But anyway, terracotta reinterpretation of the stonework that we see in Baroque buildings and the ornate interiors. If you've ever been, you haven't, you should. And we have right there on Woodmont Boulevard, Stockbroker Tudor, and right there just around the corner from Whitland, we have colonial federal revival. It was everywhere. So we did have some pioneers, some outliers. I'm going to talk about two, neither of whom had great big coattails. Louis Sullivan, a point that I'm going to make here is, because we're going to see it again, as a rule in this era and as things developed, the farther you got from the East Coast, think Boston, think tight ass, go west to Chicago, things are a little looser. You go all the way to California, and for the time, things are really loose, right? So in Chicago, new flowering of interesting non-traditional architecture develops, the prairie style. Louis Sullivan was the pioneering practitioner. And what we have here, this is the Carson Peary Scott department store. Another amazing building. If you've never been there, you should. Nothing on this building is historically, nothing is pulls from history. It's all invented by Louis Sullivan. The upper stories are actually comparatively plain, given the date and time, clad in glazed terracotta, and down at the corner, this photo on the right is the main entrance to the store, terracotta, incredibly intricate terracotta decoration. And so put a pin in the idea of applied ornament. This is modern, but it is heavily ornamented modern, and where we're going to go to the mid-century conclusion is no ornament. So Louis Sullivan was a pioneer who really didn't have any followers other than, forgot to put this in here. This did leak out into the provinces. This is right on Church Street. If you've been to Morton's, next time you go, look up. This used to be the Castronaut department store for years, and when I got here in the 70s, it was clad in a big metal box. You couldn't see all these cool windows. But if you look back at Carson Peary Scott, you will see these horizontal groupings of 3 window sashes that came to be known. He designed a lot of buildings like that, and there were other people who did as well. That came to be known as the Chicago window. And if you look here, we've got white terracotta, not very ornamented, but if you see the trios of windows, this is just a little bit of a nod to the prairie-style commercial building. The follower that Louis Sullivan had was our friend Frank Lloyd Wright, who designed, I don't know why that T is highlighted, but it's really bugging me. Well,
And we've always
Just have to stay that way.
Graphic designer.
we can live with it then.
Okay, good. It's really making me nuts. So this is the Roby House from 1910 in Chicago. And from this view, incredibly modern, if you will, not relying on any historical precedent whatsoever. The cantilevered eaves, the brickwork, the horizontal bands. This is sort of the ultimate prairie-style house. And Sullivan is the only human or natural or cultural influence that Frank Lloyd Wright would admit to having. He was a bit of a BS artist, a whole lot of a BS artist, but he did acknowledge that Louis Sullivan was his aesthetic mentor. And while this looks extremely modern, remember that the interior of this house is also rather heavily ornamented. The leaded glass windows there you see on the left, the bands of wood across the ceilings, the really very cool orb lights projecting from the ceiling, this grille work over light fixtures and skylights. This is not an unornamented building, it is simply not historic ornament. And that's kind of the difference. But neither of these guys developed a school or a following. Frank Lloyd Wright, the Taliesin Fellowship, is still training architects out there in Scottsdale, Arizona, but nobody is a Frank Lloyd Wright. It's all a little pale compared to what he did. He was a singular genius and, a jerk. Which, and many singular geniuses are. We can forgive them sometimes for that. But again, the prairie style did leak out a little bit here and there. Most of us have seen this house on Belmont Boulevard, where our friend Sandra Shelton has some connections. I'll let you explain that in yours. Certainly not a Frank Lloyd Wright, but I think you can see a little bit of the same, the big projecting eaves, the simplicity, the multiplicity of narrow, tall windows, all going back a little bit to the prairie style. I'm sure the builders of this house had seen houses in the Chicago area published in magazines, and so a little bit leaked out, but that's about as far as it went. Where we did go whole hog modern is the Craftsman era, the classic California bungalow. This wasn't just a style. This was a movement. It was a lifestyle. It was a philosophy. But just concentrating on this big photograph, what we have earmarks of the Craftsman style house, shingle siding, front porch, big front porch, often originally a gable facing the street, porch supports that are somewhat wider at the bottom than they are at the top, sitting on masonry plinths, sometimes diamond pane windows, but not always, brackets under the eaves, and rather large projecting eaves are quintessential Craftsman style architecture. It was more than a style. And as I said about Chicago being a little looser than Boston, LA was a little looser than Chicago. And there was a whole lot of stuff published in magazines and talked about the healthy California lifestyle, the golden sun, always balmy, indoor-outdoor living, clean, healthy, somewhat informal. These houses were designed specifically for servant-free living. Interestingly, you don't find Craftsman-style mansions. You find houses that are moderately large down to teeny-weeny, but nothing big. There isn't much Craftsman architecture on Whitland Avenue, and there's none on Belmead Boulevard. Those people, the bankers, the doctors, the lawyers, had their feet in the revival styles. This was a house for other people, for the everyman. It was designed for really the first wave of middle-class home ownership. These houses were the first to automatically be designed with modern systems in mind. You won't ever find it, well, I don't ever say never, but you would rarely find a craftsman-style house that was not designed with some form of central heating, not forced air like we're used to, but room for ductwork and that sort of thing, with electricity, knob and tube running through the walls, and a bathroom and a kitchen with running water. That's the wave that hit from the early teens to about 1930. It was as close to mass-produced as anything that had ever happened. They were sold through catalogs and that sort of thing. And a famous proponent of this outfit was Gustav Stickley, Stickley Furniture. Gustav Stickley published a magazine called The Craftsman. It was a thing. However, over time and over geographical travel, life here in Nashville was not a whole lot like life in LA. Back then. It's more like life in LA now, but not so much back then. The bungalows and craftsman-style houses that were built here, I seriously doubt many people had that philosophical underpinning. It was just a style, and they liked it, and it was accessible, and you could buy plans out of a catalog and give them to your builder. Or a lot of them were spec built. Builders would do what they do now, which is develop subdivisions and build a bunch of houses and sell them to people. It was a style. It was no longer a movement. And as we moved toward the Depression, up through the 20s, the style began to morph into, and we get these interesting mashups between bungalow floor plan and neoclassical columns or half timbering. It was no longer pure. It was just an aesthetic development as people went along and bought what they liked. A couple of things about bungalows that a lot of people already know is they were sold through catalogs. Plan books had been around since the middle of the 19th century. Designers, Alexander Jackson Downing and others would sell plans. They would publish books, and house wrights or builders would take those plans and develop them into a three-dimensional thing. Here, you got plans and specs. And if you wanted the building materials, you got those too. It would arrive on a boxcar, and your builder could go pick it up and take it to your lot and build it. So there were catalogs didn't just sell houses, they also sold plans. The biggest and most well-known was Aladdin. That name has kind of been lost to Sears, but there were several companies up in the north part of the Middle West, Upper Peninsula of Michigan and places like that. This is the Pomona from Aladdin. Pomona, get the California connection? Even though Aladdin was, I think, in Michigan. Here is one from the Sears catalog, the Valonia. But you see all the earmarks of the style on both of these plans. And this is my favorite Craftsman in the city. It is a lousy photograph. This is a very hard house to photograph because it is always backlit. The sun never hits the front of this house, and so it's really hard to get a good shot of it. It's on Blair Boulevard, just, you could throw a rock and hit it. Beautiful, beautiful little Craftsman house. You see the brackets under the eaves. You see the columns on the plinths. You see it is that you can't see it in this picture, but it's shingle siding, big projecting eaves, classic. But we've got 12,000 houses like this in Nashville, and if you want to go from Seattle to Miami or Portland to LA, there are millions still standing, and there are millions that have been gone. This was America's first modern. However, it's gone. It vanished in the Depression. After the crash in 1929, 1930, and then a reemergence of some prosperity in the late 30s, and then going into the Second World War. By the time the GIs came marching home in 1945-46, every single thing was different. And so our domestic architecture and everything else reflected that. Meanwhile, in Europe, some radically different designs were beginning to emerge based on schools of thought. All involved rejection of the past, and most rejected any form of ornamentation, certainly applied ornament. And there were several. that didn't have legs. The Vienna Secession is one that that was fairly well known. Gustav Klimt was, okay, quit doing that. Gustav Klimt was a member of the secession movement and was involved in the design and construction of a number of these houses. This is the Villa Müller, designed by Adolf Loos in Prague? Yeah, Prague. Good for me.
Hey, David, on that little pull down right there,
Yes.
pull your little cursor over a single page, and that will fix most of your problems, I think.
Yes.
Now tap.
Ah! Thank you. See what happens when you, yeah. Excellent, thank you. I owe you one. I think you can see that there's ornaments pretty much rejected here. The secession movement promoted an integration or a harmony between structure and ornament, and so some of the interiors of houses like this were heavily decorated, but it was all a part of the overall architectural concept. No legs, gone. De Stijl was another one based in the Netherlands. Again, rejection of historic style, rejection of ornamentation, applied or otherwise, and promoted the rejection of any sort of natural forms, colors, anything like that in favor of pure abstraction. A member of the De Stijl movement was Piet Mondrian, and if you know his paintings, they are shapes, colors, usually rectilinear, totally abstract, no representational form at all. And so De Stijl comes up with buildings like this, and not very many. This is the Schroeder House in Utrecht, built in the 1920s, and it is almost, to me, it looks like an abstraction of what a house is supposed to be, and something of an explosion. It looks to me like a three-dimensional Mondrian painting. And he also designed the red and blue chair up there in the upper left, and I've never sat in one because all of them are museum pieces and you can't sit in them, but can you imagine trying to sit on that? It is an abstraction of a chair. Yeah, okay. Kim sat in one and they're awful. Thank you, Kim. Did the museum guards usher you out? Or?
No, this was,
You hopped the barrier at the Met.
You ran quickly.
No, this was a copy in a showroom that would still produce them. It's just I thought it was going to be so comfortable. I said it.
No, nobody sits in a chair like this. It was an idea of a chair. Again, and so does it make any sense that there's not many legs? I mean, if your furniture is going to be like that,
Cushions.
yeah, cushions would help. So here's one that did have legs, and this is getting us towards where we're going. The Bauhaus, located in 3 different cities in Germany. Is it too hot in here? It is too hot in here. Can we maybe open this? Until I'm told no, I'm gonna.
Excuse me, I'll go see if Tim can turn down.
Can we
the
crank
AC.
up the air?
Yeah.
There's a lot of hot air in here, I'm talking. So the Bauhaus was a design school. They taught architecture, they taught furniture design, housewares, fabrics, designed for complete environments. It was a complete rejection of any historic style. They embraced a near stark simplicity, absolutely nothing ornamented at all. The item itself or the building itself was its own beauty, its own ornament. The ornamentation was the design of the thing itself. They embraced the idea of mass production, which, well, bless them, they were idealists. Not only the idea of mass producing objects that went together to make these buildings, but also the idea eventually of mass producing consumer goods and things, which they didn't succeed in because, can I have that water? Right, thank you. I mean, they succeeded, but have you ever shopped at Herman Miller or Knoll? It ain't cheap. So, embrace the idea of a house or a building as a machine for living. The whole idea of this is a machine where people can live and thrive. again, kind of like Wright, there's some BS here, but you can't, geniuses are what they are. Famous proponents, names you're going to that will pop up again in this lecture, and you'll probably see in the future. Walter Gropius, who was the founder of the school, one of the founders of the school, and ran it for a time. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who's generally known in the world as Mies, an architect who also ran the school before he immigrated to the U.S. Marcel Breuer, another instructor and designer at the school, and Eileen Gray, another instructor, designer at the school. One thing, just as a side note, is as an outfit, the Bauhaus was progressive for its time. Not only did they have female students, they had female instructors, and in 1920, that was a somewhat radical concept. So we look at this building itself. We see cubical forms. We see color, gray, white, and a little bit of red on the door. We see walls of glass, which is an important concept. Frank expression of structure was key in this movement. And so this building, like many others designed by these architects, is not being held up by the outer walls. That glass is simply a screen between inside and outside. And the structure, if you go in there, you can see the columns that hold up the roof. And you'll see that again and again in these buildings. Another interesting thing that had legs is I don't have any housewares here, but I would say that most of us have seen one or more of these pieces of furniture. The Barcelona chair there on the left, the Vasily chair designed by Mies, the Vasily chair, and the Breuer or Cheska chair there in the middle, designed by Marcel Breuer, and the Eileen Gray table, aptly named because Eileen Gray designed it. All 4 of these pieces have been more or less continuous production since the 1920s. Every one of these is 100 years old. And they look, to me, as fresh and modern as anything you can get now. So we've got 100. So for me, that's some legs that Wright didn't have, and Sullivan didn't have, and De Stijl didn't have. There's legs here. Some other influential buildings. This is. I want to live here. I want to live here. I would have to wear a bathrobe, when I got out of the shower because it's clear. But this is the Barcelona World's Fair Pavilion for the German state, 1928, designed by Mies. Just a series of planes, windows, walls coated and clad in beautiful stone. Sort of to me, I'm thinking, well, what's different between this and the Schroeder House, the exploded abstract? This is less abstract. It is more grounded. It is more a real building without the self-consciousness of that those exploding walls and ceilings. Another very influential building is the Tugendhat House, built in Brno in the Czech Republic. This was also designed by Mies in 1928. This is the street facade, clear of any kind of ornamentation whatsoever. There's a garage over there facing the street on the right end of it, which the dark thing is the garage door, which expresses the modernity of this building. There's a garage, frankly expressed. There's not a carriage house in the back or anything. There's a garage right there on the street, 1928. You enter on this level. You see some glass pass through to the back side, and here is the back of the house facing the garden. This is built on a fairly steep slope away from the street, and so that upper level up here is the back side of what we just saw. You enter on the upper level. There are bedrooms up there, and you descend on a curving stair down to the main living level, which, again, that screen of glass is the only thing that separates you from the beautiful garden. Not a bit of ornament anywhere. A couple of things about this house that lead to the principles that we're talking about or express the principles. This is the plan, and there are some service areas here, bathrooms, kitchen, that sort of thing, but this entire area is one big open space articulated only by this curving wall that separates dining from living There's a beautiful living area that looks out to the garden and an office music room. Can you see the piano indicated there? But this is all one volume. And the structure is apparent because these little dots are structural columns. And you can see that nothing within the building, nor is the skin of the building holding the building up. The building, you could blow out those windows and the building would still be there. You could take out the curving wall, and in fact, actually, the East Germans did take out that wall. It had to be put back in. So it is a structure in and of itself with these beautiful components that are sort of the machine for living. The photo on the below this is the curved wall and the dining table in there, and here are chairs, Barcelona chair, looking out into the garden. But we have to take a little side road here. Meanwhile, back in Europe, there was an exhibition of decorative arts and design in 1925 in Paris that coalesced a lot of stylistic developments that were coming that were certainly modern in that they were not historically oriented, but it was strictly an ornamental style. There was not much philosophy behind it. It was certainly not plain. It was gaudy and deluxe. So modern but primarily decorative and not philosophical. Lots of ornamentation, lavish use of color and materials. Popular in the 20s and the 30s in Europe, made a splash here, but the Depression pretty much shut it down before we got a lot. Chrysler Building is the sort of quintessential. If you've been there, the lobby spaces are amazing. This is an elevator cab ceiling. That's an elevator door. This is the lobby. That is stone. Totally deluxe, lavish use of materials, profligate use of materials, and never much seen in domestic architecture, seen primarily in more monumental buildings. The Depression largely cut the legs out from under that. Good many WPA projects into the 30s, and we have a number of really cool small courthouses around Tennessee that the WPA built, as well as our own, which is now the Frist Center. That was designed by local architects Marr and Holman as a WPA project, as was our courthouse. So it's reflected here in Nashville. Hermitage Hotel men's room, and if you haven't been to the Hermitage room, and Tom and I will take you in there. We'll holler out and say, "Ladies coming in!" And in we go. I've taken any number of ladies in there. It is absolutely amazing, and it expresses a lot about what made Art Deco wonderful. The color, it's a riot of color. The floors, red, black, and green terrazzo. The porcelain is celadon green. The walls are black and green mirror tile. The post office, now the Frist. The lobby is a spectacular Art Deco space. And we've lost the Stallman building, which was renamed the Tennessee building, designed also by Marr and Holman here in town. Spectacular use of, yes? Stainless steel curving over the top, pointy things, lots of pointy things combined with floral forms are typical Art Deco. I don't know what you call it. Typical of Art Deco. Yes.
Well, I don't think I'd ever put together before how the men's room at the Hermitage Hotel is so Art Deco, but the building is one.
Yeah. It was renovated in the 30s.
That's
as
amazing.
was the ladies' room, and then it was re-renovated in the 50s, and it was all gone.
Yeah. Was the ladies' room ever as good looking as the men's?
People who know said it was.
The ladies' room was a barber shop.
Oh.
There was no ladies' room there.
Okay. Well, maybe. Yeah.
MLK High School? Is that?
Yeah. Buena Vista Elementary. There are a number around. Usually, though, some form of government finance was required in the 30s because you didn't just build a building. You were broke. We move into something that is sometimes confused with Art Deco, and this is streamline modern or art moderne, it is often called, stripped of ornament. So none of the Art Deco jags and jigs and flower forms, but very slick and smooth and sort of has the same aesthetic feel and spirit as Art Deco. This came into play mid-30s up until World War II. Best examples around the country are Greyhound bus terminals. One firm designed a whole mess of them. This one on the left is Cleveland, Ohio. It is still standing. Curved and curves. It was all angles and curves and windows on corners without any much applied ornament. The one on the right is from Atlanta. I remember this building growing up. It was grubby and terrible. There was something really sort of magic and cool about it. And my dad, who would have been, this was opened in 1937, who was like, would have been 16 or 15 at the time, remembered just being like, number one, nothing had been built since 1932. And it was exciting because it was just so incredibly modern and cool. And so, of course, it was torn down in the 70s for something utterly banal, and, you know, there you go. There goes the magic of bus travel. Occasionally, this does pop up, and the streamline modern was much more often seen in domestic architecture than Deco was. It was easier to build and cheaper to build. There was not all that ornament to create. So we have some of these among the people who were still wealthy enough to build a house. This house on the right is on Chickering in Belmead. And of course the Belmead Theater and the Melrose Theaters were built in the 1930s, right about 1940. And it's really hard to just pull down a great picture of the Belmead Theater. So I thought, oh, well, I'll just get a picture of that and put it in. And I looked for a long time, and this is the best I could get. Yes?
Have you discovered ever the architect of the building on the right?
No, I do not know.
We're trying to find out whether Keeble was involved. If we don't, we can't find
I'm
any
looking
proof.
forward to next week. I'm looking forward to next week. You're on the hook, baby. You brought it up.
There are a lot of similarities with Deep Woods.
Yeah. So,
David, just a little bit farther out, the Royal Oaks Apartments now. It's a beautiful,
Yeah.
modern building.
yeah.
But I'm
Yeah, it is, and with the little octagonal bathroom windows, yeah.
and
Not-
they ran out of piping when the war came in. They put all the bathrooms, but that's
Yeah, well, yes.
Wow.
And that's, yes.
or whatever.
Yeah, as a realtor, I have to be aware of, okay, buy that unit, honey, but the pipes, that's not true. If you want something in the Royal Oaks, I'll fight like hell to get it for you, I promise. Yes, but the Royal Oaks is another example of that streamlined modern. But there's just not a lot of it. Coming out of the Depression and going into World War II, there just wasn't much. European ideas did drift our way. And we see a few flowerings of what would be called the international style a little later in the 1930s before the war. This is the Philadelphia Savings Fund Society building, built by an American firm called Howland Lescaz, who were influenced by the European ideas that they had seen. Really, really wonderful building. If you've been to, it's on Market Street in Philadelphia, and it is absolutely worth a visit. It is now a hotel, and you can't go unless you're invited to a big event. Can't go on the big banking floor. It's now the ballroom, but everything else is just, the exterior is intact and wonderful. And we see a lot of these Bauhaus principles, the frank expression of the structural grid, the absolute absence of applied ornamentation, any kind of historic reference at all. And at the same time, other buildings built contemporaneous with this, office buildings, were either Art Deco or historic revivals. So they stripped away the Deco and we got this wonderful thing. Out in California, where everything was a little looser, we have Richard Neutra, who was an Austrian and was trained in Europe but came to the US in the late 1920s. This is the Lovell House hanging off a hill in LA. Absolutely phenomenal building. He designed a number of others as we progressed towards World War II, but even in LA, not many people could afford to build a house. So his practice was pretty much confined to houses for rich people and there were enough to keep him going, but there wasn't anybody else. But again, you see, I mean, does this resemble in your mind what we saw from the Bauhaus in Europe? Stripped of ornament, indoor, outdoor, a lot of glass. These structural elements are clearly expressed. So, we hit a tipping point. World War II and the Nazis did architecture a favor. They didn't mean to, but they did. They took power in Germany in 1933, and by the end of that year, the Bauhaus was labeled either degenerate, because it was different and not romantic German romanticism, and communist, because some of the proponents and people at the school had progressive communist ideas, and there were all those women running around, and that was a little scary. So they closed the school. They pressured it to close. Walter Gropius immigrated to the UK first in 34 and then came to Massachusetts in 37. Marcel Breuer did the same thing in 35 and 37. And Mies finally came to Chicago in 1938, and the international style is born. The academics took over. Gropius and Breuer landed at Harvard. Mies landed at the Illinois Institute of Technology. The academic focus shifted to Bauhaus principles: no applied ornament, open planning, frank expression of structure and materials, and a generation of architects, including my dad, was trained that way. So, Walter and Mrs. Gropius built a house in Lincoln, Massachusetts. You could have just picked this up from Dessau, Germany, and plopped it down there in Lincoln. Here's Marcel Breuer's house in Massachusetts, 1939, both of those. After the war, these ideas absolutely take over. These are Mies buildings in Chicago. On the left is the Crown Hall, among many buildings he designed on the campus of IIT, 1950-ish, and on the right is two buildings, the Lakeshore Drive apartments. He designed several others along Lakeshore Drive. The structural grid is clearly expressed: walls of glass, no ornament. The buildings and their proportions and their relationship to each other constitute the aesthetic concept, and it's pretty amazing. It took over corporate America. Here are two buildings. The one on the left is Lever House. This is my favorite skyscraper in the entire world. Every time I'm in New York, I have to go by and look at it, because you just want to look at this building. Designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, an American firm, but heavily influenced by Bauhaus principles. It is an incredibly elegant glass box, the upright part sitting on a horizontal glass box raised up on stainless steel columns. It is just a glass box with the structural elements. You can kind of peekaboo through there, and the wall of glass is merely a screen between you and whatever's going on outside in New York. The one on the right is designed by Mies. It is more famous. I find it rather dreary, but it is what it is. And also, I take issue with a lot of stuff on this building, but that's really probably beside the point. Again, though, structure clearly expressed, walls of glass, zero ornament, big plaza. They got into plazas, which may or may not have been a good idea, but this was Plaza-Rama. Back then, you couldn't build an office building without a plaza. Interesting juxtaposition. That's a good art history word, juxtaposition. This is the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, built in the early 1930s. It's an Art Deco palace. And a short 30 years later, we've got this glass box. Transformation is really complete.
Was it called Bauhaus in the U.S. or was it called something else?
It was called International Style, but this is the Bauhaus comes here. Yeah. So again, we're staying with the Bauhaus in America. Domestic architecture. This is the Farnsworth House, and I'm showing you this just because I want to look at it. Designed by Mies for a friend and client, Edith Farnsworth, who hated living there because it was hot in the summer and cold in the winter, and they got into she sued him, and he countersued, and it was a big mess. Anyway, what a spectacular building floating above the prairie. with the and just a little glass cube, a machine for living. And Philip Johnson, same era. Philip Johnson, who was an American architect but had studied, he had been in Germany in the 1930s. He absorbed these ideas and came back with them. This is his house in New Canaan, Connecticut. And if you're rich enough to have 150 acres in New Canaan, Connecticut, you can live right there and walk around naked if you want, because no one can see you. It's hard to do in 12 South, you know? And corporate America in full embrace. This is Eero Saarinen, our author of the St. Louis Arch and the red womb chair in which I sit most evenings and sip a cocktail, designed a number of spectacular buildings. This is the General Motors Technical Center building, built in 1956 in Warren, Michigan. Exterior, I think you're seeing the earmarks of the international style pretty clearly. This incredibly cool floating stair in the lobby. The concept and the execution of the building in itself is the ornamentation. You don't need to apply anything. It's just so spectacular. And one of the drawbacks of this is you have to be a genius to do it well, and there's a lot of banality that comes along after when all we're doing is a glass box. But that's another lecture. This is another example, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, the Connecticut General Life Insurance headquarters in Hartford, the same stuff. And Fortune 500 companies were building these campuses all around, designed in the international style, frequently in a big open expanse, so that you could be seen and see others. International style goes west, and what do we say about the West? A little bit looser. Okay? This is the house in Pacific Palisades, the LA area of Charles and Ray Eames. They were a married couple, and it has, in recent decades, Ray has been given her due as co-designer. It was Charles Eames because he was a boy, but it turns out it was Charles and Ray as a team who designed houses and furniture and objects. This is their house in Pacific Palisades, and I'm beginning to see a little hints of things that are loosening the grip. The panels of color, the curvilinear elements, two iconic pieces of furniture there in their office, there in the center. The Eames leather and rosewood lounge chair, or this Eames bentwood chair that is not this chair, but this chair model was the first piece of furniture my parents acquired after their marriage in 1946. I still have it. It's decrepit. I had to buy a copy to put in my living room, but it's been in my living room for 20 years or so, and now it's in the spare bedroom. A bit of a loosening of the rectilinear grip, just beginning out there where things are easy breezy in California. A lot of influence spread through the Case Study House program. Arts and Architecture magazine between 1945 and 1964 commissioned gifted architects to design houses. Case Study sort of relies on, it goes back to ideas about how do we design for modern families? How do we build with metal, not wood? A lot of these buildings have metal structures, as you can see here. Craig Elwood was one of their stable of designers. And this is the Smith House hanging off the side of a hill, and all structure clearly expressed in metal. Maybe the most famous LA house in the world, my favorite, I've never been there, but you can go, so next trip to LA, should I live that long, is the Stahl House, designed by Pierre Koenig, literally hanging out off the side of a hill, and this is Greater LA on display through the screen of glass that separates you from the rest of the world. The pool here, pool deck, and it was a small house built for people who are not wealthy. I don't even know how to talk about it. I love it so much. Clear expression of structure. This was one of the ones they built out of metal. So the roof deck is metal, and there are I-beams clearly expressed supporting the metal roof deck. And in LA, you don't need a whole lot of roof, which is going to come back to us as an idea. International style, as it spreads out, begins to soften. Remember what happened with the craftsman styles as we moved up into the 1920s. We began to get stylistic drift. Oh, let's put some Roman columns on this one. Let's do a half-timber job on this and some stone and brick mix. It's still a bungalow, but we're kind of moving out of the box. Well, that began to happen in California as well. Joseph Eichler was a developer who built entire neighborhoods of houses for upper middle class families, he had a stable of gifted architects. And what's different about this from every other international style house that we've seen? Gable. Look at that. Holy mackerel. They've got a sloped roof. They can't do that. Who said they could do that? But they did. Interiors built around courtyards. It was a sense of warmth and enclosure rather than, as much as I love the Tugendhat house, it's kind of frosty, you know? Beautiful, but a little chilly. Eichler houses were beautiful and felt warm and friendly and homelike. Here's another Eichler house. You see the breeze blocks coming in to the picture. A little bit of decoration, just a hint. Warm tones of wood as opposed to cold gray and white. Another proponent of this loosening, a lot of mid-century modern in Palm Springs. One of the leaders in the 50s and 60s was an architect named William Crissell. Again, we see gable. We see a bit of detail as opposed to starkness. Here's another one of Crissell's house with some warm tones of wood and the rough stone, little texture that didn't happen at the Bauhaus in Germany. Interior, again, a textured fireplace. There's a wood-clad wall there in the back. And of course, someone put that rug in there, which is, you know, I don't think William Crissell had anything to do with that rug, but it's, you know, it works. And he was a big fan of butterfly roofs, which there are some here. I wouldn't build a butterfly roof in a city with more than 30 inches of rain every year. But, hey, you know, Palm Springs, have at it. But again, you see the warmth, I mean, the orange, just a little bit away from the stiffness of the box. And so, as we wind toward today, we're almost done, international style goes mainstream. I'm not going to show you a lot of really bland boxes. We've got some right here in Nashville, Tennessee, built in the 60s. They're just, whew. I love a glass box as much as the next person. I'm so glad we're building them again now. I'm a big fan, but gosh, you got to give it some gas here. So I'm not going to show you any of those. But I like the idea of coming back to catalog houses. These were not, you couldn't get any house I'm going to show you shipped to you on a rail car, but you could certainly buy the plans. And so here, and they were published in magazines and they were published in catalogs. I've actually got a kind of spiral-bound book published by an architect in Atlanta called Designs for Gracious Living. And it's, you know, and sometimes you see, oh, here's the mid-century modern version, and oh, here's the colonialized ranch version, and it's the same floor plan. So, you know, it was a style. The philosophical foundations were gone. We have coalesced into an aesthetic style, something that people like because they like it. Like me. I like it just because I like it. I don't care about the machine for living. That's nonsense. I just like a Breuer chair. I like a Barcelona chair. I've got two in my living room at all times. They're in my living room. I love them. These two, several people have sat on them.
Yes.
Yeah. They're comfortable if you got long legs. So, what do we have here? We have a magazine published house that's pretty rigid box. But, break up. You see the little gables there? Dottie West used to live in a house just off of Harding Place with this kind of facade. It's still, I don't know who lives there now. Dottie used to. And this, I'm sorry about the shine on the page there, but you see the angle and the projecting roof. And a butterfly, of course. And the offset Brady Bunch gable. My son and daughter-in-law live in a house that is almost exactly this plan out in Bordeaux. Their house is a little bigger in every dimension, but it's pretty much this plan. And we can even do a ranch. Take away the ranchiness of it, and you've got a mid-century modern ranch. This is where we have come down to, this is simply aesthetics. We like it because we like it. And, of course, all good things come to an end. And other good things start. But the era begins to end. Nothing happens. Nobody blows a whistle and says, okay, this is over. That's starting. There's a blend. 1968, Sea Ranch in Sonoma, California. One of the first examples of the move away from international style and into, eventually, it takes a while, postmodernism. It takes 20 years, but we get to postmodern, the reaction against the modernists. But here we see there's nothing historical about any of this, but it's also not walls of glass. It's also not metal and hard plaster. It's softer, warmer, more enclosed, less open, and more angled. This is sort of the seed of the end of the international style. And that is the end of my prepared remarks. I brought it in just 5 minutes over an hour.
David, can you take some questions?
Yeah, I'm going to make up an answer if I don't know. Yes?
I grew up in a house in Fort Worth, Texas that had mid-century sort of modern elements.
Yep.
My mother, as she was trying to direct people how to get to the house, she said, it's the contemporary house on the right. So was the term mid-century modern used by, she just always called it contemporary?
Well, I didn't bring that in because, we're just hitting the high points. Contemporary is what my dad called our house. It was contemporary. Contemporary was contemporaneous with mid-century modern, and it was kind of called, yes, contemporary. And your mom was exactly right, and everybody else would have said the same thing. And that's what my dad would have said.
So when did the other term become?
In the past, in the present, it became mid-century modern recently, because it is no longer contemporary.
Right, sure.
It was 1963 or whenever that was.
Right.
So one of the things, I teach architectural styles to my fellow realtors because God bless them. They really don't know what they know what they're selling, but they don't know what style they're selling. And so sometimes we get really weird descriptions of buildings in listings, and I get all jacked out of shape. And so anyway, I teach that to my fellow realtors. And one of the things that I always say is that none of this makes any sense until we're all like 40, 50, 60, 70 years down the road. And so, I don't know what we're going to call what we're building now. I'll be gone and good riddance. So we'll call, God knows what they're doing in Brentwood and the Tall Skinnies. And this is all over the map. Somebody will come up with something to describe those. I don't have to do it.
I've heard the term atomic ranch.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
And I don't quite, I've said that because I've repeated it, that our house growing up was at
Yeah, it's an
Kate's
Atomic
house.
Ranch. Yeah, Atomic Ranch, it's a magazine.
Oh.
But probably based on people calling things atomic ranches. Atomic Era, Sputnik, Death by Atom Bomb. Remember, Duck can cover? Duck can cover. Remember the little song? You get up under the windows at your elementary school and Duck can cover, because when the Russians bomb us, the glass is going to go all the way to the other side of the room and you'll live. Okay, great. So Atomic Ranch. Yeah.
David, what's the town in Indiana where they have
Columbus.
Right,
Columbus.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, Columbus, Indiana, if you don't know, It's a great weekend trip. You can get here. It's 4 or 5 hours from here, 4 maybe. The Cummins Diesel Company is headquartered there, and the Cummins Diesel family were modernists, modern fans, and they established a fund to, if you picked an architect from their list, they would pay for your architectural work. So every church in town, bunch of elementary and high schools, the city newspaper office, all kinds of just, I am paid designed the library, and there are all these.
Both the Sarandons.
Both of the Sarandons, father and son, amazing stuff, and they have
The
walking
Cummins house
tours.
is amazing.
Huh?
Have you seen the Cummins house?
I have not been in it, no.
Oh, you
Yeah,
need
it
to
is
do
pretty,
that,
yeah,
yeah.
they were loaded, and so.
It was his college roommate that was an architect.
Yeah,
And
okay, that's how we got interested,
That was
yeah.
the
Yeah.
way that.
When you're showing one of the more modern ranch with the interior courtyard, would they harken back to, I've gathered in Europe, again, they had the wall and they had the interior courtyards in France and I think in England as well, or did they disregard that and say, this is our new idea of an open space?
I think they thought it was a new idea,
Okay.
yeah. Even if it really wasn't, they were gonna
Okay.
claim it for their own.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was back to the Romans, Pompeii, we got them. It was a warm, dry climate concept that didn't translate so well to wet, more temperate climates. So you see them in plans, you don't see them built here. Yeah, out in California, I mean, the Eichler houses, almost all, many of them have a courtyard, but it's in coastal California, it doesn't rain.
That's what I was about to say, the sort of sound like that's weather
Yeah.
related, if you're gonna have most of an arid
Right.
climate, or it's great to have open.
Yeah,
If not,
not so
you're
good.
gonna have.
And the aesthetics of that sometimes cause people to build houses that weren't, I mean, flat roofs. I think a flat roof is terrific on a house, but it's hard to maintain in a wet climate. It's great in the desert, like and the butterfly, oh my God. But, yeah. So, I mean, big walls of glass. I mean, you see them everywhere. Philip Johnson built that house in Connecticut, it must have been freezing in the winter, but okay. It is an aesthetic style that no longer had that clamped onto that machine for living thing. It just developed into something that we look back on and say, oh, I know what that is. That looks like X. And because people, I mean, I love it, so I'm happy that we have those.